Hi guys, so today we're going to look at dialogue rules. So dialogue or conversations, speech in your creative piece is obviously a really important element in telling a good story. We need to have our characters talking to one another. There are a number of rules that you need to make sure that you are following when you are writing conversations in text. A lot of students get this wrong, and when they do, it makes their writing really difficult to follow. So if you just follow these 5 steps, you will be able to write a really dynamic and clear conversation. So first and foremost, number 1, you must use quotation marks when you're writing your speech. Okay, so these little guys over here. You need to indicate to me the difference between you as the narrator telling the story and your characters when they're actually speaking to one another. Make sure you're using them. Step 2, a new speaker needs a new line, and this indicates the turn-taking structure of a conversation. So when we think about how we're having conversations, we're always taking turns. There's a structure. So you'll have one person who is speaking and the other person is waiting for their turn. They're listening, but they're quiet, they're waiting. Then this person will stop speaking and they give it over to the other person and they can start having their turn. They're speaking whilst this one's waiting. And we constantly back and forth through conversations all the time. If we didn't have that turn-taking structure, it would just be chaos. We'd always be talking over the top of one another. So turn-taking structure is in everyday life. It's replicated in text through the line drop, so that we're aware that when someone is speaking, they've got that line, and then the next person's turn, it goes underneath. I'm going to show you that in a sec. Number 3, punctuation marks go inside the quotation marks. Question marks, exclamation marks, full stops, commas, they go inside the quotation marks. You need to introduce who is speaking. So when we're in that turn-taking mode, I need to know whose turn it is at what time. So that's going to be an important thing, that you're actually telling me, Johnny said this, Hillary said this, Johnny, Hillary, and I can see that interplay between them. Number 5, try to change up the verb said to something a bit more interesting and a bit more insightful. If I'm reading a story and it says, he said, she said, he said, boring, I'm already going to sleep. It's not giving me any information. Instead, try and be creative. You can infuse so much meaning into your work with well-chosen verbs. For instance, if I had a sentence, what do you want? Johnny said. Okay. What do you want? Johnny asked. All right. It's not really giving me any personality. It's not really giving me much information. If we change the verb up to what do you want? Johnny yelled. Okay, he's yelling. That's probably giving me a bit more information. He might be angry. He might be surprised. What do you want? Johnny roared. Okay, so roared's getting better. Now I can start to see that he's angry, like really angry, he's furious, he's roaring, he bellowed. What about what do you want? Johnny hissed or Johnny whispered. Again, it completely changes the meaning or the tone of that. So be really mindful of the verbs that you're using. They change the meaning a lot. So let's put those 5 things into practice here. Harriet stared at her daughter in complete shock. She couldn't believe her ears. What do you mean you lost him? I'm going to make up this story as we go. Okay, so Harriet is clearly speaking because I've introduced this character and then the quotation marks exist on her same line. Note the question mark is going inside the quotation mark there. What do you mean you lost him? I don't know, Melanie wailed. He, quotation mark, he was there 1 second and then gone the next. Line drop. So I'm line dropping now because I'm going back to Harriet. I asked you to do one thing for me, Melanie. How could you lose your little brother? Harriet was beside herself with worry. Jackson was only 4 years old. Melanie looked. Melanie's face was as red as a tomato as she, oh my gosh, held back tears. Now, I'm sorry, she cried. I don't know what happened. Well, let's get moving. Harriet. I'm going to use said here, but I'm going to use an adverb. Okay, so an adverb describes a verb, and that's going to give said a little bit more oomph. So Harriet said anxiously. We need to find him now. Okay, so let's have a look at the structure of what I've done here. Harriet stared at her daughter in complete shock. She couldn't believe her ears. What do you mean you lost him? Now, I don't need to say she said because I know that Harriet is talking here. I don't know. So I've line dropped because now Melanie is speaking. So line drop. I don't know, Melanie wailed. Melanie is continuing to speak. He was there 1 second and then gone the next. Line drop because Harriet is speaking again. I asked you to do one thing for me, Melanie. How could you lose your little brother? Harriet was beside herself with worry. Jackson was only 4 years old. Melanie's face was as red as a tomato as she held back tears. Line dropped because now Melanie is speaking. I'm sorry, she cried. I don't know what happened. Line drop back to Harriet. Well, let's get moving, Harriet said anxiously. We need to find him now. So hopefully this is showing you the significance of the line drops, because look what happens when I take them away. Can you see how difficult that is for me to read when I'm marking this? Okay, and I get work like this from kids. Okay, let's try reading that now. Harriet stared at her daughter in complete shock. She couldn't believe her ears. What do you mean you lost him? I don't know, Melanie wailed. He was there 1 second and then gone the next. I asked you to do one thing for me, Melanie. How could you lose your little brother? Look at all the punctuation marks that are happening really close together. And I can't see the turn-taking structure very easily. It's quite overwhelming for me to read. So if you are giving me this, you will get marked down because this is incorrect structure and it actually obscures the meaning. It's not clear at all. So I'm going to fix that up now I never want to see this. I never want to see 2 quotation marks back to back like this. Okay, when you're proofreading your piece, that is one thing that you can really clearly look for. Make sure that you are not doing that. Ah, that's better. I can read that much more easily. Okay, so those are your basic dialogue rules. So when you're writing conversation, this is what I want you to keep in mind. Okay?